tiny, 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 tiny time lapse. 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 Time lapse, time lapse, time lapse, time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. That's it. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Beautiful. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Tiny, 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 tiny time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. This is going to take a while. Tiny time lapse. So now I have to do the incredibly dull task of working out where the items are going to go, you know? So, you know what that means? It's a tiny, 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 tiny time lapse. 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 Time lapse, time lapse, time lapse, time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Yes. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Tiny, 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 really good. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Right. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Tiny, tiny time lapse. Wait, hang on, what? There's got to be a creative way in which we can work around this. It definitely isn't the fastest method in the world, but let's crack on with third-person time lapse. Tiny, 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 tiny 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 time lapse. Time lapse, time lapse, time lapse, time lapse. That's not good. Oh, that is not good. This is ridiculous. I don't even know what to say. I'm also a tiny, tiny, tiny bit embarrassed. I've done enough talking. That definitely sounded like something from a horror film. Let's move on.